Hello, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another Historians interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Maybe you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is another historian making their official debut here on the show. Now, our guest today is a senior lecturer in the Department of History and International Studies at the University of Benin, Nigeria, and a visiting research scholar at the Harriet Tubman Institute for Research on Africa and Its Diaspora at York University, Canada. Her work focuses on African and Black women entrepreneurs, cultural economy, and the ways women use creativity and skill to build resilience across generations. She is passionate about recovering African perspectives in global history and connecting the experiences of continental Africans and the wider diaspora. So, without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, joining us all the way from Toronto, historian Mary Isibor. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. And just a heads up, viewers and listeners, if I sound a little bit off, I am recovering from a cold, so I may sound a little bit different,
Oh,
but that's okay. That's okay.
that's okay.
Well, Mary, again, I am so happy to have you here on the show. Now, before we dive into your background, is there a little fun fact that many people may not know about you?
Yeah, people don't know that apart from academics, I'm a businesswoman.
Really?
Uh, I'm a businesswoman, so I guess that's what imparted on my research area on looking at women that are skillful. Looking at everyday women's activities in the economy. So part of my creativity contributed to that. So a lot of
Nice.
people don't know that apart from the fact that I'm in academics, I am also in business.
Awesome, Mary. That's amazing. That is amazing. So, for viewers and listeners now meeting you for the very first time, can you share with us your journey into the world of history and how you chose your specific disciplines of study?
Well, thank you. That's a very beautiful question, and it's something I love to talk about over and over again. My journey into history did not begin in the university. It actually started from my home.
Okay.
It started from my mother and my grandmother. They were two women that shaped my perspective. My mother was a teacher. She was an elementary school teacher. And then I saw the way she put in her passion into her students. The educational system was not so convenient. There was no money or no resources per se, but she gave her all. Like, she was so committed into what she was doing. And I was kind of, I like that spirit. And I was like, I wanted to teach too, but I wanted to teach in a level where I could make a much bigger impact in the economy historically, and generationally. Then the story of my grandmother. When we were growing up, she used to tell us a lot of stories about our history, about our ancestors, about our artistry. Because I grew up in Benin City. I am from Benin. I'm an Edo person, and then we are very rich in history.
Mm.
Benin City is one of the in West Africa. When you talk about West Africa, they are one of their civilization is one of the sophisticated civilization in West Africa. So growing up in that kind of a background that has a sophisticated history, it's so interesting when you come together at night. You come together, and my grandmother begins to tell us stories about colonialism. She told us a lot of beautiful stories. But in the midst of that story, even as a child, I knew something was missing. Like, there are some missing things that were not adding up in the story. And then my curiosity, I wanted to know if she told us a lot of how we could make a lot of things. The women were so productive in the Benin society, about our civilization. Why is it that these people that have this kind of civilization in the European narratives, why are they tend to be underdeveloped?
Mm.
They're seen as not a primitive and not civilized. But we could make this kind of a lot of beautiful things. Even during the 1897, during the British invasion of Benin City, when they came and they saw our artwork, they were amazed. They were amazed that, oh, these people could make this kind of sophisticated artworks. So if they were amazed at not just our artwork, but our urban planning, they saw the way the Benin society was structured, and they saw the political system, how structured it was. So if we had this kind of system in place, why are we tend to be underdeveloped? So
Mm.
I was curious and I wanted answers to those questions. So that curiosity led me to like, oh, I think I need to know what is happening. So growing up, I started reading book. I read a book, uh, um, how Europe underdeveloped Africa, Walter Rodney. So reading that book opened my eyes. It was just like someone lights up a light in a dark room. Someone put on
Mm.
a light in the dark room, and I want to like, what's happening? Why? Those why was where those curiosity and the fact that I was very creative as a child. I love to make things with my hands, and those things put together, the identity from where I came from, my mother's passion for education, my grandmother's storytelling, and my curiosity led me to study history. Because I see history, I do not just study it, I live history.
Mm.
See it as a foundation to everything or every course you want to study. And
Awesome.
when it came to choosing that course, my parents were not happy about it. They were like, why history of all courses? You are smart, you're intelligent. Why don't you choose engineering? Why don't you choose law? Because in the African society, they call it professional, they term it for professional courses. So those professional courses are things like they want their financial status to be elevated. So they feel when you do those courses, you will get a good job. And at the end of the day, you'll be able to pay back the family the money they spent in your education. So you
Mm.
saying you want to study history is like, why? So you want me to waste my money to train you in history? Where are you going to get a job? What are you going to do after studying history? As if one cannot just wake up and intentionally decide to study history. But I chose history. I chose history because I wanted answers to the questions that has been bothering me. I wanted answers to the narrative that Europeans stated about African society. And I wanted African history to be told with truth. I wanted those missing link in the African history. I wanted answers to them. And that was why I chose history. And I'm here. I'm not just reading it, I'm teaching it, I'm living it.
Nice. Amazing, mate. Thank you so much for sharing that incredible story. Absolutely incredible. Now, going forward in your journey in history, there's going to be a few fan questions we're going to go throughout the interview. One of my viewers asks, when you decide to pursue history, what were some of the most fascinating stories that you've uncovered in your research?
Oh, one of the most thank you for that question. And I told you I was telling you about what I read about Walter Rodney. And then one of the most fascinating story I've seen, if I talk about the Benin society, women have not actually been the history of women have not actually been documented. If you go to the archives, especially when it comes to the Benin society, you hardly see the stories of women. But then in the midst of my research, I saw how women became instrumental to the development of Benin Kingdom. We talk about the women like Queen Idia, Queen Emota. These were women that stood for justice. They were politically influential, and they contributed to the growth of Benin society. So that was why I had the interest to like, oh, if these women could do that, then even in the colonial period, even though the colonial people, the colonial economies tend to sideline the women from history, but we saw what they did. We saw how productive they were. We saw that even though those things they were doing, they were sustaining families, they were sustaining the economy, they were sustaining their communities. So I got interest to dive into that aspect of history.
Nice. After this interview, I'll have to get you in contact with a fellow historian of mine, Katie Clark, who actually wrote a book on the warrior African queens of classical antiquity. That was a
Well,
very thought-provoking interview because it highlighted some of the most powerful African queens across the continent of Africa. Because generally speaking, people assume that one of the most powerful queens in the continent of Africa came from Egypt, Cleopatra, who is a powerful queen in her own right, but she is of Greek descent. She's of Greek origins. And there are many other powerful queens that existed before her. And one of my favorite queen from the classical age is the Kush queen, or the Nubian queen, Amonferyatus, who was the one-eyed queen who fought the Romans. And I absolutely love her story.
Mm, that's beautiful.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, in your research, Mary, as you've uncovered these stories and giving the voices back to these women, giving their autonomy, ultimately, as an historian and a scholar, what is ultimately your goal and promise, not just to yourself, but to other people who come across your research and read it?
Well, thank you for that question. My work fills a gap in historical scholarship, the gap that overlook everyday African woman, like I always emphasize on, not the queens, not the elite women, but everyday women whose skills sustains families and economy.
Mm,
Yeah, that's what my work focused on. And then I look at my work satisfies the need to center African women as economic thinkers, as culture keepers, mm, and builders of community memory. So that's basically what my work. That's basically what my work looked at, and how that's what I feel people that go through my work should align with, or should see when they read my work.
absolutely. And I know, as historians, and also when it comes to writers and researchers, there are going to be days where we are struggling to either craft a story we want from our research or provide a persuasive argument based upon our research. And it's going to be a roadblock in the middle of it. And it can be very, very frustrating. So, for you, Mary, how have you overcome the dreaded writer's block, if you've ever encountered it?
Uh, how will I put it? I don't want to say I've not encountered it, but I've always been attached to creativity, to resilience. Yeah, I think these were things that have driven me in academics. And no matter what you encountered as a scholar, right?
Right.
You always however, you always make sure that your work is you're looking for the truth in your work. You're trying to bring out the truth, because people believe that the study of history is just about the past.
Mm,
Yeah, but I told people that history is one of the things that shape leaders, that shape thinkers. Because when you go to the archives and you see documents, you have to be critical to get what you want from those documents, and to interpret it in a way that people will understand, not to distort from it, or not to alter it, right?
very
But
true.
yeah, but to bring out the facts of what you want concerning your research, or to align to your research. So we've faced a lot of obstacles when it comes to research work. Yeah, but
Mm.
as an historian, your resistance, your resilience, to fulfill that which you believe, or your dream, or what you're pursuing, is what keeps us going.
Absolutely, Mary. Absolutely. And here's another fan question. Now, you previously talked about your favorite piece of research that you've uncovered. Now, another viewer asked, what was probably the most difficult piece to research, either for a paper or a presentation, that you struggled with?
Well, the most difficult piece I struggled with is getting archival documents. Yeah,
Mm,
because in history, archival document is one of the major source of historical documentation or interpretation. So when you talk about sources of African history, or sources of history, if you do how will I put it now? If you do historiography, they tell you about sources of writing history. And we as historians, we emphasize on the fact that if your work does not have enough or sufficient archival documents, we tend not to see it as a work that is well researched.
mm,
But I'm doing a work that is based on post-colonial African society. They don't have much of those work in the archives. So now, but you have to like interpret, because you can't just, when you're writing about history, you don't just start from the present. There has to be a link from the past to the present. So you
yes.
get materials, you have to get materials from the archives that is explaining things that have happened before, and that is happening now, and that is affecting your research. So most of, because I'm working on women, on women in African society, getting materials from the colonial period is kind of difficult because much work were not documented on women's activities in the colonial period, unless in the pre-colonial period. So we try to look at it from the pre-colonial period to see, oh, these people were very effective in the pre-colonial period, but when it comes to the colonial period, there was a distortion because of the colonial economy, right? And now, in post-colonial period, we are seeing that these people are being effective again because you don't just wake up to become effective. It is something that has started from the pre-colonial times. So this is one of the most difficult challenges that I have faced when it comes to my research in African women history.
Absolutely, absolutely, Mary. Now, as you mentioned before, in the beginning, you told about how when you told your parents that you were going to the realm of history, they were shocked that you were going into the field of history. Now, from that point onward, and as you've developed your research, written documents, papers, essays to prove your studies and your theories and your point, what was it like by your colleagues and other family members who learned of your discipline, of your research? What was their reaction like?
So thank you very much for that. The feedback or the reaction has been encouraging. It has been encouraging because many people say my work helps them understand their own identity.
All
Yeah.
right.
Others say that it fills gaps in what they were taught in school. Then some women tell me that it helped them to see their everyday work as part of a larger historical story or society. Because these women, like I said, they are doing work. I looked at women that does everyday work, like ordinary work. But those ordinary work, beneath this ordinary work, these women are changing identities. They are changing lives. They are sustaining communities. So when I go to meet them for interview and I talk to them that I want to document what you're doing, I see this excitement in them, like, oh, sure, I'm still going to be important in history because even though I'm not here, because somebody's going to read that work and they're going to see what I did. So, when I see the excitement in them, when I talk about them, it motivates me to want to do more.
Awesome, Mary. That is amazing. That is amazing. And that actually leads into a next set of questions, what I like to call reflective questions. Now, the first one talks about, what does it mean to be an historian in the digital social media age? Because the field of history has greatly changed over the last 20 years alone. And I've talked with a lot of historians from different backgrounds, different disciplines, from different standings, some who are still in college getting their master's or PhDs, those who have already worked on books, and those who are working on new papers. And I asked them this question because social media, coupled with the history field, is both a blessing and also a hindrance. Now, social media and the internet has allowed the field of history and historians to showcase their research on a wide scale. It's how we're able to meet like-minded people who are interested in the same things, or maybe interested in learning about our disciplines, as well as networking and growing. But social media is also a hindrance because it can be very emotionally exhausting. It's very, very draining. We leave ourselves exposed. And when I've talked with a lot of people on the show, as historians, we unfortunately leave ourselves at the mercy of those who question our credentials and if we know what we're talking about. And yes, the internet and social media has allowed new disciplines to emerge, which is awesome, which is amazing. I always believe that history needs to be expansive. History is also complex, and it needs to show its complexities, but some people do not want to show those complexities and only use one side, which is a disservice to history. So with all that said, Mary, with all that we've talked about for just this part, what still disciplines you to be the historian you are now?
Well, like we always say, um, when it comes to history, we do a course on objectivity in history, right? So when you're interpreting data, you have to stay on the fence. You have to interpret the data the way it is. But you talked about social media, and I feel that digital activism has contributed to the growth of history.
Absolutely.
It has contributed to the growth of history because a beautiful example is the recent reparation and restitution movement. You know, scholars were clamoring for the fact that the artworks that were taken from Africa should be returned back to the original owners.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then this got promoted through digital activism. And then it got to the Europeans and American museums, and they began to respond to this movement. Right? So
Right.
recently, artwork have been returned to Africa, the African people, especially the Benin Kingdom. A lot have been returned to them, even though not all. But the fact that they responded to this movement shows the impact of digital activism in promoting global history.
Very true. Very, very true, Mary.
Yeah. So when we talk about when we talk about everything that has an advantage has a disadvantage. But when an advantage of a thing is more than disadvantage, people began to find interest in it. In the African society, people don't see the importance of studying history. So, but with this recent digitalization of archival documents, right now you can sit in your house and then you can comfortably access a lot of documents online. It wasn't like that when we're studying history.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Yeah. So right now it made it so interesting for people to, when you get a lot of material, you want to write a paper, you want to do a presentation, you want to write a paper, and you have access to a lot of documents. That won't be a problem for you anymore to put together. But
That
then
is correct.
when we're in school, we have to walk to the archive, sort out your materials yourself, sit down, get books, and sometimes it's difficult to get those books. You get them, yeah, you'd have to sort out your materials and your whatever you want to put together for the paper. But right now it's so easy because you can sit in the comfort of your room and get enough materials to do what you want to do.
Couldn't agree
But in all
more.
of this, it is good to interpret it with truth. It is good
Yes.
to interpret it with fact because your own contribution to history matters. Your own contributor to that paper matters. So it's not just about using people's work. Yeah, it is about what did you get from those work that you're using and what is your contribution to knowledge when people read your paper or your article. So I think
Yes.
that's what you have at the back of your mind when we're doing the research of trying to do a presentation.
Couldn't agree more, Mary. Couldn't agree more. Now, the next question is what I talk about, the post-COVID years and the rise of AI. And I'll give some context for this big question because it's a very loaded question. I've been doing this show for about 6, 7 years. And in that time, I've interviewed a lot of historians from many different backgrounds. I've interviewed people from UK, I've interviewed people from France, I've interviewed people from Japan, some people and historians from the continent of India. I have learned so much from many, even people here in the United States. And from what I've learned, a majority of the people that I've interviewed began their careers, whether it's research, writing, or presentation, during the COVID years. And the COVID years definitely pushed everyone out of their comfort zones into finding new passions and new roads to showcase their talents. And the industry exploded and flooded when the floodgates were unleashed. You had these new waves of historians just entering the field, providing their own research, and I absolutely love it. But there has been this debate that I've been seeing between are we in a golden age or an iron age, or even going forward, a dark age with AI. And the reason why there is this argument is that many people believe, and I believe for a long time, is that we're in a golden age because there are those that are passionate, or at the time, because the market was so flooded with new voices in the industry, in the historical field, that the field is going to grow. But as time has gone on, we then begin to see a shift where there are those who are truly passionate about the field of history who want to grow, and those who only got into it because they thought, oh, these are trending, these new topics that are coming out in the world are going to be very clickbaity or stuff like that. And then only just a few years later, we have the rise of AI in terms of AI historical content, which I've seen numerous times over. And that has sparked a whole debate in of itself. Is that really helpful to the field? Because are you actually presenting the work, or are you just telling a program to do it for you? So with all that said, Mary, I would like to hear your personal thoughts on the matter, if we are in this golden age or if we're transitioning to an iron age as well as a pseudo dark age.
Well, I think my talk to that is that we're in the golden age, right? Because how will I put it? AI is taking over social media.
Mm-hmm.
But as an historian, as an historian, it is difficult to write a full paper with an AI.
Very true.
Why I would say that is that when it comes to history, we have two sources of writing history. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We have the primary and the secondary sources. So you could get the secondary sources from AI. AI could interpret the secondary sources for you. But when you're writing a paper and we are not seeing the input of your primary sources, we don't see that paper as a tangible paper. We don't see
Mm-mm.
something that is contributing to knowledge. But the truth is that AI cannot generate primary sources for you. They could to some extent because right now archival documents are digitalized, so they could also bring out some archival documents. But there are some aspects of history that you need to interpret. You went to field work. You're doing history, you go for field work. AI cannot do that for you. The only thing the AI could do for you is that you could put in the field work you have done, and AI could restructure or format it for you. But
Right.
there has to be your contribution to that work. We will see that because as a teacher, there are some assignments I'll give to my students, and when they submit their paper, I just know that this is AI generated
Mm-hmm.
because I am not seeing any aspects where they putting themselves into the work. So I just know. We are not saying that AI is not good. AI recently at this stage helps you to restructure your work.
Yeah.
Restructure the way that when you're reading it is flowing captivatively. But AI shouldn't just be used to write your whole paper because that paper, what are you contributing to knowledge? Because whatever AI is giving you, he's going to generate it for somebody else,
Very true. Yes. Absolutely very true.
right?
Yes.
So at the end of the day, you don't have any contribution to knowledge because when you put that into system, we are seeing that this thing is everywhere. And then we begin to say that, oh, you're plagiarizing.
Mm-hmm. That is
So
true.
as much as it is very good, but as a historian, I still also advise that you should put yourself in your work. That's why I say you interpret history with truth and curiosity. You can't just depend on what AI is going to generate for you. You know,
Yes.
that doesn't tell good. That doesn't tell how good you are as an historian.
Mm-mm. I agree. I totally agree with that. And especially if you're trying to, let's say, market your paper for, let's say, a research grant or a scholarship, it is
Yeah,
very, very important to showcase your individuality. And that, of course, now leads into what I like to call the business side of being an historian. So that's a
yeah.
little icebreaker question, Mary. Looking at your career, where you are right now, to where you began, thinking back, is there anything you would have done differently in terms of research, networking, showcasing your individuality as an historian, and so forth?
Yeah, there are a lot of things. Looking back to my career from where I started, because all my school from my first degree, second degree, third degree, I did them in Africa. And then being in North America, and then people tend to want to, like, you don't have the experience here, right? You didn't school in this part of the country, and they tend to want to feel that what you have acquired is not sufficient enough.
Mm,
Then another thing I look into is the fact that during my earlier years of publication, I was focusing more on a particular area. I encourage people now that are going through academics or not, you don't necessarily have to be in academics. You're already doing your master's, you want to publish articles or papers, you publish in a high impact journals, So those things has a way of promoting your career
yes,
well promoting your career. So I think those are the things that I would have changed if I had the opportunity to. But I did not regret. I'm not regretting reading history or studying history. I'm not regretting teaching history, right? Because history got me to where I am today. Yeah.
very good. Very, very true. Couldn't agree more. Now, going forward from that, I've also like to talk with historians about, finding their audience because as you and I can both agree, as well as many more, as historians, we are academically trained to write and present history in a certain way to fellow colleagues. Let's say if it's either a paper or a presentation, or sometimes even a book of reference that is going to be used in another curriculum. However, I have talked with a lot of authors who have written books for the general public. And there is this little, I would say, little struggle to balance the two in the sense of you want to still be academically sound and showcase that you know what you're talking about,
Mhm.
but also want to keep in mind that not everyone is going to pick up on the academic jargon or language unless you've been in university. So for you, Mary, when you are presenting your research to other colleagues or to the general public, how do you balance the two, your individuality as an historian, but also staying true to not only the sources and the research, but also keeping in mind of the general public?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. I am a teacher. And so when you teach in class, you communicate. And communication is when somebody understands what you're talking about. It's
Mm-hmm.
speaking terms, speaking, if you want to start speaking historical terms, people will not understand. So I teach and I talk in a very plain language that people understand. So when I say something, I try to emphasize on it because I know that a lot of people that are listening to me, they are not in academics, right? And
Right.
then people, just like you said, in the general world, so they need to understand what you're presenting and what you're talking about. So you have to communicate so people can understand, right? So when I teach in my class, sometimes I could go down to start speaking a pidgin English. A pidgin English is, in African society, those are things that we understand. It makes students want to be interested in what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, history is about storytelling. And when you're telling me about that story, it needs to be so interesting for me to want to listen to it, right? So
Right.
I try to make my class interesting for my students to be comfortable in. Not just my students, and when I do my presentation, I present in a plain language. I don't care how you think that, oh, she can't even speak big English. I want her to start speaking jargons. No, I want to talk in a way that people will understand
Yes.
because
Couldn't agree more.
it says faster. It says faster. When people are reading your work globally and they don't understand what you're talking about, people don't get interested in them. When you submit another paper or you upload another paper, people don't want to read about it because they don't understand what you're writing about or what you're
Absolutely.
so I feel it's very good to discuss or present in a very, very plain where you can take people along when you're presenting.
Couldn't agree more, Mary. Couldn't agree more. Another fan question one of my viewers asked, out of all of your research, is there one piece that you would love to explore in, funnily enough, we just talked about this just now, a reference book or a book for publication for the general public?
Yeah, there's a work I'm working on, from petty traders to international merchants. It's a work where I'll look at how women started, from their home, started trading from their home, with nothing, no capital, nothing. But today they are traveling out of the country, right, out of Africa
Mm-hmm.
continent to improve on their trade. So, this story, how did they start from having nothing or starting from being small to develop to contributing not just to the society but globally? So that's why I'm here looking at women in the diaspora, looking at the women entrepreneurs in diaspora. These women came from somewhere, right? And I've looked
Right.
at Nigeria in the Africa continent. So I'm looking at them. I'm looking at the activities here right now. How are they sustaining economy? What is their contribution to sustainability? What is their contribution to development? How is their resilience and creativity in the diaspora? So
Yeah.
that's the balance I want to give to my work. I have looked at it in one area. So having experienced two worlds, like where I grew up back home, where I grew up from, and where I am right now, I think I will have a balance to interpret that work better.
Amazing, Mary.
That
Amazing.
that give my works authenticity because I live my research, I live my scholarship.
Very true, Mary. Very true. And there's actually another fan question, which I think every historian knows the answer to, but it's sometimes a little shy, not shy, but it's like hesitant to answer. And that question is, as historians, we are storytellers in our own right. We research these incredible stories, these incredible tales for documentation, for presentation, and for preservation.
Mhm.
And we could keep researching, writing, and doing all this incredible stuff. But at the end of the day, we know it has to come to an end. And a lot of historians I've talked with dread that point because they get so invested in the research. But there has to be an end point where the research is like, okay, we have to stop here because we're going to lose sight of our original vision when we started with this research project or presentation. So for you, Mary, in your career, throughout your research, when did you come to the point where you had to stop writing, stop researching, and just focus on writing? And then from that point, knowing when to stop from that point and being confident that the research that you've gathered and written is going to stay true to not only the research's original vision, but your original vision as the historian.
I thank you. But you know that as an historian, you don't stop researching. You don't stop
Right.
you don't stop writing. You could write this manuscript and keep it, and then you see another thing that got your interest. You go back to like, oh, I would have put it this way. So you are always reversing what you have done, right? You don't you we don't stop researching. We don't stop reading. Our curiosity is what kept us in this feed, and so we continue to do a research that will keep us, that will make us contribute to knowledge.
Right.
So because I can't say that there's been a point where I would say, I've stopped this, I've stopped that. But I know during my PhD time, I did a lot of field work on women. I did a lot of field
Mm.
work on women, and I feel that even at now, I want to write a book with the field work, with the resource I've gathered during that period. I could still write a book. But then I'm writing stories about everyday women. They are doing things every day, right? So when there's some data you get last year, you get maybe in 2 years you've gotten some data. They might not so be useful this year. Not useful per se, but you still want to add more to it so that the more recent your work is, the more authenticity, or the more how will I put it, the more value it has to your work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very well spoken, Mary.
Yeah. So if I am, for example, I want to talk a story about a woman, is somebody that did a particular thing in the past, like 2 years ago, and then I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna say it like in the next 3 years. You know, the more recent activities of that person, the more better, the more valuable my work will be. So it means that, oh, you have really been digging into this particular research.
Yes. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And of course, as historians, as we talked about a little bit, networking is very, very, very vital for us in terms of promoting, getting our research across, and meeting like minded people. So, Mary, for this question in particular, are there any people you would like to give a personal shout out to who have helped you on your journey? And also, in your opinion, how important is it for historians to begin networking?
Well, networking is very important when it comes to research, when it comes to as an historian, because not just networking, you have to collaborate. Yeah, because if you're in a particular field, there are people that have been in that field that you want to look up to.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yes, I want to give a shout out to Owoyemi. She has done a lot of work on women entrepreneurs. That has affected my work positively, and there are a lot of people, a lot of mentors that have been there. So I feel that networking is very important when it comes to an historian, not just an historian. When it comes to whatever field you find yourself, when you network, there's a way it expands your knowledge, it expands your contribution to your field of study or your field of
Yes.
career. Yeah, and it has a way of because people that you're networking with, they have some of them have gone ahead of you, and they just set a pace for you. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So I also want to give a shout out to Adebayo. You know, he has been very supportive when it comes to this career of growth. A lot of people, my project supervisor then, during my thesis, during my PhD, Professor Dan Chuku. Then I have some wonderful colleagues in my department that have supported my growth as an historian. I talk about Professor Ifidon, Professor Sadolo, a lot of people that I cannot make mention of.
Hmm.
You read about a lot of people's work, about Toyin Falola's work that has written extensively on African history, right? Then
Right.
Sadna Hartman, Sadia Hartman, that have talked about women, everyday work of women. when you looked at these people's work, you are inspired to want to do something.
Absolutely, Mary. Absolutely. And we now reached the final two questions of this amazing historian's interview. And the first question is this: with everything we've talked about and more, what do you want people to take away from your research and how you present and preserve history?
Well, thank you. I want people to take away context. I want people to take away perspective when it comes to my research, when they read my work. And I want people to take away the fact that I've been able to fill the gap fill the gap of what has been missing in African history, especially when it comes to African women entrepreneurs, right? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
my area sits in the field of gender, entrepreneurship, migration, and African history. So I wanted to see the missing link in those areas, right? That's
Right.
that's what I build around my scholarship. So I try as much as possible to do extensive research in that area, to contribute to knowledge in that area. So when people pick up my work, they see that I'm actually filling a gap in those areas.
Nice. Very nice, Mary. And finally, to all the fellow historians out there watching or listening to this interview, what is your advice to them, your word of wisdom?
Well, thank you. My word of wisdom to them is study history with heart. Yeah, study history with curiosity, study history with humility, right? Study
Mhm.
study history with all these things. And remember that history is not just about the past, it is the foundation of the future. So I tell my students that when people are telling you, don't be discouraged, a lot of them are they are scared or they are ashamed to tell people that I'm studying history. Because when they stay beside their friends, those ones are studying engineering, they're studying medicine, they're studying law, you know, they want to feel inferior to just say I'm studying history. I tell them that history is a course that have shaped great leaders. You know, history is a course that gives you critical mind and critical thinking. So study history with this curiosity that you are going to contribute to the foundation of the future. So that's my advice.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said, Mary. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude another amazing historians interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to Mary for coming on the show, making her official debut, and hopefully not the last time we see her on the show. If you'd like to see Mary back on the show for a follow-up interview or to be part of the season 4 of the Historians Lounge lineup, comment down below. Mary, thank you so much for coming on the show. I truly do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now, where can people find you to reach out and talk with you to learn more about you and your research? And do you have any upcoming projects or announcements you would like to share?
Well, people can reach me through the University of Benin website. They can reach me through the Harriet Tubman Institute website. Yeah, they can also reach me through my professional and academic platforms and social media handles. They can reach me through there. And for now, I'm still working or I'm still cooking what I want to announce later because I'm still working on it.
Awesome. Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. Thank everyone again for joining us for another amazing historians interview. A huge thank you to Mary for coming on the show. We wish her the very best in her career. And as I said, viewers and listeners, this will not be the last time. So if you'd like to see Mary back on the show for the new year in a follow-up interview, or again to be a part of the season 4 lineup of the Historians Lounge, like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and I will make it happen. And as always, viewers and listeners, thank you so much for your love and support. This has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wishing you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you all in the final episodes for the month of November. Take care, everyone.